Hi, I'm That Slavic Writer Guy, and today we're going to be talking about Richard Wagner's The Flying Dutchman, the story of a doomed ship's captain who, in a chance encounter with another ship, gets betrothed to the other captain's daughter in order to save his soul. The daughter then proceeds to marry him and does so, much to the kvetching and consternation of her ex-boyfriend. That's basically the whole thing. So to get more into the broad strokes, gremo. The Flying Dutchman premiered on January 2nd, 1843, and was the first of Wagner's opera to really put him on the map as a name, for which he was just another struggling artist, starving opera composer, trying to make it. He had to leave the Prussian states for Riga, which was then in the Russian Empire, where he proceeded to continue to be a struggling composer, and mostly racked up a shit ton of debt that he could not pay. And he decided that the only way out of this predicament was that he would have to flee Riga in the Russian Empire for Paris via London. The problem was then that he couldn't just get on a regular boat because of all the debt he'd racked up. The Russian Empire basically took his passport and said, "We're going to hold this so you can't leave until you pay your debts." And so he paid what little money he had left to be smuggled out on a ship. I guess it was kind of a cargo ship or whatever. And so he set out, basically illegally leaving the Russian Empire and fleeing his debts, on a voyage that was supposed to take a week, and ended up taking more like 3 weeks because of bad weather, during which the ship had to shelter in the fjords of Norway. During this time, it was when he got the inspiration for The Flying Dutchman. And so he made it to Paris, continued to live in poverty, tried to get the opera he wrote before The Flying Dutchman staged to basically ill effect. And then finally, after a few years, he finally managed to get The Flying Dutchman premiered on stage in Dresden, back in the Prussian states, which came out to success and really put him as a name on the German music scene. And it was a name he continued to hold until uprising in the Kingdom of Saxony, where Dresden was at the time, made him politically on the outs, and he had to flee into exile. When then he had money problems again, trying to establish himself again. But the point is that The Flying Dutchman really is the first one that made Wagner a name, kind of like Nabucco was with Verdi, before which he was just a no-name, trying to get his feet wet in the business and struggling. So this was Wagner's first big breakout. It's a really simple plot that in opera time takes about 2.5 hours to occur. So with that in mind, let's get to our very fortunately short cast of characters. First of all, we've got Daland, the captain of a very normal Norwegian ship, who is played by a bass, and his helmsman, who is played by a tenor. And the helmsman basically just sits around being a helmsman. He's not a very major character. But as the opera starts, they meet the Dutchman, who is played by a bass baritone, so basically a high bass or a low baritone. Then we've got Senta, who is Daland's daughter, and is really a hopeless romantic about meeting the perfect guy who she's going to have a fairy tale romance with. We've got, Senta is played by a soprano. Then we also have her kind of governess called Mary, and she's a contralto, so kind of low. And that's really the whole cast of characters. Act 1. Captain Daland is on his way home when he runs into a bit of bad weather off the coast of Norway, and he's forced to shelter in one of the fjords. Really, can you see where this is coming from Wagner's actual experience? And so while they're in the fjord and the storm is raging and the crew has gone to sleep, the helmsman, who is standing watch, sees a very ghouly ship. And to weather the storm, they have to kind of tie their hulls together and weather it together so they don't get too battered around. And so the captain wakes up and he meets this guy who's the captain of this ghoul ship. And he meets the Captain Daland, and he's like, "Well, I'm really kind of cursed with my crew to wander the sea forever because I blasphemed and appealed to Satan for something as opposed to God. And for that reason, I was damned by one of God's angels to do this." And The deal is that I'm left ashore once every 7 years to try and find someone who will marry me on the spot and really be true to me for the rest of my life to lift the curse. And the captain of the ghoul ship is like, and hey, I have like a chest full of gold and jewels. So if you got any younger like daughters or something, you might want to give it. And Colin is like, shit, I have a daughter who's about marrying age. And I also really like that chest full of gold. So what if we just betroth her to you and then I get the gold? And uh, uh, the Dutchman is like, sweet, yeah, sounds like a deal. Yeah, let's do this. And so they both set sail after the storm for Dalin's home in order to carry out the marriage. Two, Dalen's daughter, Senta, is singing with her friends about spring shit. And she is also gazing at the picture of her betrothed now that she is going to marry this Dutchman. And she thinks he's really handsome and is really down with being betrothed to him. To the point where she wants to sing a song about another Dutchman, the famed Flying Dutchman, um, uh, over the will of her like governess. And she's really down with this whole thing about saving the guy from Satan, and it's just like, wow, this is so romantic. So following on the heels of that, a huntsman named Eric shows up, and he turns out that he is Senta's ex, and he is really not happy about the coming engagement to essentially a satanic ghoul that's looking for redemption. And so he keeps warning her that, like, okay, you're marrying a ghoul who's, doomed to wander the seven seas until you can get someone to take him, and you realize he's gonna like carry you off into the sea and away from mortar people. And like, this is bad shit. You do not want to do this. And Senta's like, OMG, I didn't know that. That's so romantic. And he can't get her to come off it. And towards the end of the act, Dahlin arrives with the stranger Dutchman. And Senta and him have their first meeting. And Senta is apparently like so taken with this Dutchman guy that she barely even noticed Dalen, her own dad, is there. And the two of them get betrothed and then sing a full-on operatic duet about how they will be true to each other and love each other for the end of time, despite only having met exactly once in true opera fashion. Act 3, Senta's friends and all of the local girls bring a bunch of food and drink out onto wherever they're living on the coast and invite the crew of Dalen's ship in order to kind of have a party. And in doing so, the live crew comes and they sing this, which is one of the most famous things from the opera, and probably by being alive you have heard of it. Take a listen. That's the Sailor's Chorus, and following it, they invite the crew of the ghost ship to also come and drink and party with them, but they're like, we're ghosts, we don't do that. And so they don't, and the girls are all still like, oh, wow, a ghost ship and ghosts doomed to wander everything for anything, ever, this is so cool. And the sailors on Dalin's ship is just like, yeah, these are ghosts that we tell bad stories about that haunt the sea. You do not want to be fangirling over them. And we're decided to, get the fuck out. And so they do, just in time for Senta to show up, again followed by a very persistent Eric, who is like, you're talking about being true to this other Dutchman guy, but you left me, and wasn't it all about us right before you got this betrothal from your father that you're getting married to a doomed ghost guy? And the Dutchman is listening to all this, going, "Oh shit! Why would she? That's right. Why would she ever take this ghost guy who she only met once, who her father told her to marry, over the guy she was with beforehand?" In a weird moment of actual operatic lucidity, that it makes no sense that she would do this, but she does. And He summons all of the ghost ship and basically says, "Yeah, I told you about all of this and saving me from death, but what I haven't told you is I am actually the Flying Dutchman. You know that guy from the legend? Huh, that's me." And so, you have to marry me or I will be forever lost to doom and I can't try again for the next 7 years. And Senta is like, "Oh my god, this really is so romantic. I'm marrying a legend. Isn't this so great? And I'm going to save him." So she goes out to sea with them and throws herself into the sea along with the ghosts, declaring that she will be faithful to the Flying Dutchman, who apparently revealed his identity only at the end of the opera, even though it was really fucking clear from the beginning of Act 1 who this guy is. The ship disappears, and Senta and the Flying Dutchman are raised into heaven, having been saved. The end. So that is the Flying Dutchman. It being a Wagner opera, all of this takes about 2.5 hours. So it was just his start, and by the end of his career, we were getting 5.5 hours. But it's really the most accessible of Wagner's operas if you're looking for a Wagner opera to start. So don't be afraid of it. It's a lot of fun singing. The Sailors chorus is great fun. So if your first time out for Wagner, I definitely recommend this one other than Parsifal or Lohengrin, which I've seen, or really any one of the Ring operas, which they're disjointed if you don't see them one after the other. And so one thing on my bucket list is to go to Bayreuth and really see it as it's supposed to be done. I digress. So yeah, bottom line, if you're starting out for Wagner, this is the one you want to go to. And as a writer, it seems like I would have featured this in one of my books, but I can't off the top of my head think of one. But I do have a ghost ship that is doomed to endlessly wander the seas that may have been mistaken for the Flying Dutchman. In my series, Voyages of Fortune, a historical fantasy time travel adventure with a pirate ship that can fold space and alter the course of history and bend time eventually. So it's Voyages of Fortune. This is book one if you want to get into that with a real ship adventure because you're like Senta and you just think that story is so fucking cool. So the link will be in the description. And with that being that, I am that Slavic writer guy. You can like this or don't. You can subscribe to this or don't. I don't really give a fuck, but if you do, I'll probably be like, yay, and fuck off if you don't. Because then you're not cool. But until then, my next opera talk, I will just say, as we say here in Slovenia, na svidenje.